What's up, everybody, and welcome to the discussion where we get into the real of it all. And we are here with the wonderful Taran Armstrong. Taran, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm very happy to be here. Very excited for this discussion.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to have you guys. Guys, if you watch my old videos before Lee was here, before we even really started getting into it, I would talk about RHAP and Taran all the time. These guys were a part of the reason I started even podcasting in the first place. So great shout out to Taran. I'm so happy he's here. Let's get into it. If you guys see the title, today we're going to be getting into some strategy. Like over here, we talk about strategy here and there, but I've never really had a video like this where we're going to really just dig into it, I feel. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the idea is to talk about the structures of alliances. So in Big Brother, we've noticed that there have been two very powerful alliance structures that have come to be. One being kind of this onion alliance structure that Derek kind of perfected, and then we have the cookout slash parachute alliance structure, period, that the cookout and the brigade did. And I feel like it'll be an interesting conversation to have today to kind of discuss the differences of the two and really just kind of dig deep into each of them. But first, I did want to ask Taran some questions. So, Taran, I wanted to ask you, and the reason I want to ask you this is because I noticed there's a lot of people who watch Big Brother who do listen to you speak about it a lot, you know? And I was wondering if you could tell us, how did you get into Big Brother to begin with?
Uh, I was a little kid. I was a little baby boy. Back in the year of 2000, which was 23 years ago at this point. And at first I watched Survivor Borneo, and basically I watched it because my mom watched it. She had it on the TV, and
Mm-hmm.
so I watched it, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was weird. There was this dude walking around naked on an island, and some other dude running around talking about counting chickens before they hatched, and I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
um and then Big Brother would occasionally air after an episode of Survivor Borneo.
Mm-hmm.
Big Brother 1. And being a little kid, I always wanted to continue to watch TV for as long as possible. Unfortunately for me, Big Brother 1 was Big Brother 1, and it put me to sleep most of the time. However, when Big Brother 2 came around,
Mm-hmm.
I was hooked. I was super into it.
Really?
I loved watching Dr. Will. He was so funny to me as a kid. He like I remember specifically that like I always had like kind of poofy curly hair. And so did Dr. Will, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I got you. And so uh I just it was really interesting. There was something different about Big Brother than Survivor, in that like Dr. Will navigates season 2 basically as a loner after Chilltown is decimated.
Yeah.
And that's different than Survivor. Survivor, everyone's in a team,
Yeah.
to get to the end. I felt like a loner as a kid, so I related a lot more to Big Brother. And from then it never stopped.
Okay, that's interesting. The reason I was like, really, is because how old? I want to know, how old were you when you were watching that? Because for you to be
I was
intrigued.
9.
9.
Yeah.
That is something. Like, I remember getting into Big Brother around 11. I was like 11. But those younger ages, it's such a difference year to year. So 9 is still young, it seems, for you to like be intrigued by that. So that's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got into Big Brother, and ever since then you just continued to watch it since Big Brother 2 on. You've been watching since the beginning.
Yeah, there were a couple of times that I thought maybe this is the end, you know?
Okay. Like
Um
what season?
so after basically the 1-2 punch of season 8 into season 9
Hmm.
really like, I don't know if I want this anymore. I enjoyed season 8, but the end result of it and just the way the entire season played out just felt really wrong to me. And then season 9 was such a disaster that I was like, I don't know if this show is really for me anymore. And I wasn't sure if I was gonna watch season 10, and then, season 10 happened.
Mhm.
Uh, so that brought me back.
And then you watch season 10 and you were
And then season 12 and 13 again, and this is a time where I'm like, you know, I'm like in high school into college kind of stuff, and my life is changing. I'm busy doing other things, so
Mhm.
that contributes as well. But 13 really bugged me. 12 was pretty boring at the time. Uh,
Really? To watch it
eh,
like as it went on, it was boring?
yeah, I mean, I mean, it was a foregone conclusion that Hayden was going to win the
That's
thing
true.
from like the second he took out Matt.
Mhm.
Um, and so then 14 again kind of drew me back in. When I heard Dan was coming back, I was like, oh, okay, obviously I'm watching this. And then again, like right after that, 15 hits, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh god,
Yeah. So it's been a up and down. It's been an up and down.
a
But
bit, yeah. But once 16 came, that's when I really got into the podcasts.
okay.
And it's also like around the same time I was in college by then, and I was meeting people that watched the shows, and getting friends who watched, and that's when I was really like, okay, I've been watching this thing for a long time. This is
Mhm.
now, I didn't realize it, but it's become a huge part of my identity.
Yeah.
And it was a huge part of my summer every summer. I'd, be diving into the live feeds and watching the show. So for as much as I, was like, maybe I won't watch it anymore, I always came back. So
Okay, that's fair enough. That's good. That's really interesting. So when you started podcasting, you said around Big Brother 16.
I got into the podcast as in like I was listening to them a lot
Oh,
during
okay.
16. It wasn't until 17 that I was podcasting for Rob as a podcast. The
Hmm.
first season I podcast for was actually Big Brother Canada 3. And then that, went into Big Brother 17.
Okay, that's really good. That's awesome. That's been a while. That's been
Yeah.
some years, huh?
Closing
What
in
was that,
on
like
10
10
years at
years?
this point.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You've been doing this for 10 years. Do you feel like when you see, first of all, do you feel like you notice any, because you a lot of people watch your podcast. A lot of people know who you are in the Big Brother community. And what I feel like I noticed is that sometimes you have influence on my perception of the game in a way. Do you feel like you've ever noticed that from the fandom, or at least from people who listen to your podcast?
Um, so in a way, yes. I remember when I first started podcasting, or not many, very first started, but like over time, I started seeing discussion
Mhm.
about the show because I was always like a lurker. I never participated in discussions, but I'd
Mhm.
always read discussions. And I remember early on, the first few times that I would see discussion where people would refer to me and what I said, and
Yeah.
they'd be like, "Well, well, Taran said
Mhm.
this, or he thinks this," and I was like, "Whoa, that's weird." Or they would just like, whether it was a direct reference to me or not, be referring to points that I was making, and
Yeah.
um, before I started podcasting, I always felt like I never really saw people talking about the show the way I wanted people to talk about it.
Mhm.
That was part of my audition video for the podcast, was that like, I felt like, and it sounds especially weird now, but I felt like the very strategic perspective was not really represented online,
Yeah.
because the online discussion was a lot of like, we're
Mhm.
making me nicknames for this person,
Yeah. It
and
kind of
this is
still is in a
well,
way.
very true, very true. And so it was definitely weird, and certainly I would not claim to have brought that discussion to the online discourse. I think that what I discovered when I started podcasting is that it had always been there, And I just got lucky enough to be, you know, on an early podcast that allowed me to sort of talk about it, and an audience showed up for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in terms of like, you know, influencing opinion, uh, that's like that gets a little more complicated. I think that certainly there are people um, that probably agree with opinions that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and or are inclined to agree with opinions that I have, and maybe those people would be, maybe if they were like leaning in one direction, I'd be able to, if they heard me explain a point, they might lean slightly back into this other direction.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, like you know, you kind of come to your own conclusions a lot of the time. Um, and the people that are going to disagree with me are often, they're going to disagree with me regardless.
Yeah.
You know, most of the time people disagree with me civilly. They will say, you know, I usually agree with Taran, but he's way off on this point, you idiot. So you know, I don't know. It's definitely strange, but I've certainly uh been I think in particular, I did an off-season podcast years ago now about the evolution of alliance structure,
Yeah.
and it's very relevant for our current discussion. But um, that was, I think, one of the more impactful podcasts that I did, because for that one, I know that there are players that listened to it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you know, that's you know, like understanding strategy at a slightly deeper level, you know, could have an impact on the actual game. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's weird. I certainly don't think of myself as somebody that has uh, a meaningful amount of influence over the
Yeah.
fan base, but I do try to take uh, responsibility for the position and the platform that I have, and try to um, you know, teach as much as I can
Okay.
about issues, and you know, speak out on things that are happening. I've certainly learned a lot over, you know, the last 10 years that I've been podcasting, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's very important that, you know, this is a silly show, it's a dumb show, but there's so much that it can teach you
Yeah.
about all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's super important to try to learn from it as much as possible.
Exactly. I like that. And I do appreciate, like, a lot of people I feel like either disregard or don't know about the times that you do go out of your way to speak out about a lot of things when it comes to the show. And I do appreciate that. I remember listening to you speak about things throughout, especially like these last two couple of seasons, 24 and 23, that became discourse in the community, and you always actively speak towards it. And I really love that. I do. So yeah, we can leave it there. I won't bombard you with any more questions, even though there's more that I would like to
Also,
ask. But
sorry for giving such long-winded answers.
no, that's fine. It's cool. No worries. We can get into the tea. Let's get into it
All
because
right.
um firstly, I feel like I would like for us to discuss how these two main strategies that we're going to talk about today came to be, or how they became so prevalent. I feel like we can start with the onion strategy, which is, how would you define? How do you think you would define to someone the onion strategy?
Yeah, I mean, so I sort of like think of this as coined by I actually don't remember the name of the player on Survivor, but in Survivor Gabon, they reference the onion strategy, and the basic premise is that obviously on a show like this, you create an alliance, and ideally, your alliance has more people in it than the opposing alliance or the rest of the players or whatever the case may be. Um, but if that's the end of it, if it's just okay, I have 8 people in my alliance and there are 6 people outside of the alliance, congrats. Like you've won the game against those 6 people. But what happens when it comes down to 8 people? Uh, you no longer have an alliance to win out the day. What's going to happen? So the idea is, okay, I'm going to structure my alliance with layers. The first layer of the onion is the 8-person alliance, which beats out the 6-person alliance on the other side. Within the 8-person alliance, I have another majority alliance within that, which is maybe a 5-person alliance. And so once you get down to 8, you now have a 5-person alliance to beat out the rest of the other 3. And then within that 5-person alliance, you have a secret 3-person trio. And so once you get to 5, you vote out the other 2, and then once you're at the 3, you actually have a secret final 2 alliance that is going to eliminate the 3rd person, and that is the layers of the onion in the onion strategy.
Yes, sir. So, do you feel like, when it comes to, I guess, the onion strategy, how do you define the origin? Do you feel like this is something that only came to be from 16, or do you feel like there were remnants of the idea before Big Brother 16, or do you feel like it's something that grew? How do you feel about, I guess, how it came to be, how that happened in Big
Yeah, I
Brother?
mean, so there's definitely like a path that got there, and it's not super clean. There are, it's not even super like distinctive necessarily at all times from the other version of this we'll talk about, which is like the parachute version of it. I would definitely, if you're interested in this, like in more detail, check out that Evolution of Alliance Structure podcast that I did. But the basics of it are that, like, I would say, there's a natural inclination toward the onion strategy.
Yeah.
Most people that have an alliance, if they're not intentionally doing it and thinking in their heads, I'm doing the onion strategy,
Hmm.
they are at least instinctually going, okay, I have this alliance, but within this alliance, I have this person that I'm closest to.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's definitely something that happened. I would say that the best and cleanest origin for it probably comes from from Big Brother 6. Um, where Maggie
Hmm.
is one of the first winners to really um, capitalize on this kind of strategy, whether she meant to or not, right? She had the Friendship Alliance that, beat out the Sovereign Six, mostly via competitions. But, at the end of the day, they beat them out. Um, and Maggie was just the most well-positioned player within her own alliance. She
Yeah.
had burrowed down and had the best relationships, and was able to control the shots as the numbers dwindled, and she won for it. Um, and so that's kind of the first seed of this kind of thing. There are other versions of it. I think
Hmm.
that in season 7, you had the Doom Squad. Oh, now I'm
Something like that. Legion
blanking.
of Doom.
Legion of Doom. That was it.
Yeah.
With Will and Boogie and Danielle and James. Um, they had a version of this that
Yeah.
had a lot of parachute elements as well. You had Dan in season 10 when
Hmm.
he created his bigger alliance with Memphis and Keisha, and them. That was also structured in this way. Dan probably the next big step in that direction.
Hmm.
Um, and eventually you of course get to Derek in season
Yeah.
16, which is the best example of the onion strategy.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that. I felt pretty much exactly the same with those specific seasons mentioned. I feel like, especially with like Maggie's example, I can really see, like, of course, with the onion strategy, you're trying to make sure that you're insulated in the terms of you have the alliance within the alliance within the alliance. But I think also what it is like, those layers in front of you are also targets in front of you. Like, I feel like, especially with Derek, you saw there's an intention to ensure that the people who aren't in your central layer are targeted. And I feel like a part, like, that's a big part of the onion structure. Um, when it comes to the strategy of it all, is to make sure that the people on the outside of the onion are kind of just targets, like on purpose, you know? And I feel like that's the aspect that I notice. For example, like Jackson Mickey. In that season, he was such a one of the bigger targets, but he was also trying to implement the strategy. I felt, because after 16, it seemed like every season after that, people continuously tried again, and it kept being that the person wasn't good at making their threat level lower. And I feel like that's just so important, especially for the onion strategy, because it if it, well, Jackson won, but still there's people where it happens, and I don't even know how he won now I'm thinking about it, but it's like when it happens, it makes it way harder for you. Jackson's path was way more hard. And
He
also,
had to win a lot of
yeah,
competitions
the
to get
winning
there.
comps, I was going to say, like, with the onion strategy, I notice a lot of the time they're just winning the comp. It's more so are in this big alliance and we're winning the comps. And I feel like, do you think that it's able to be implemented without all the comp being in it? Because we saw with the committee, with BB16, that, and with Mickey, like, they had to kind of win those comps. But it's like, can you do it without it, or is it better for, I guess, the parachute alliance, which we're not there yet, for them to like do that?
Yeah, I think that it's a very astute point, which is that the biggest weakness of the onion strategy is that uh, you are insulated and you have
Yeah,
no way of branching out,
yeah,
which means that unlike Survivor, where this terminology originated, in Survivor, if you have 8 people versus 6 people, there's almost nothing the 6 people can do to stop you from just voting them out one by one. In Big Brother, it's different. In Big
yeah.
Brother, the competitions matter a lot. And if your 8-person alliance versus the other 6 people can't win a competition to save their lives, then
Mhm.
those 6 people will keep winning competitions and vote out your nicely structured onion
Yeah.
one by one until there's nothing left. So it's definitely the biggest weakness of this variation of strategy, because you do have to win the competitions, and it's
Hmm.
important for your alliance and your structure. And this is something that Derek understood, and certainly something that Cody understood in 22.
Hmm.
You have to have the people that are winning the comps.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little dangerous, of course, because where do you start to cut those people off? If you have if you have all the best competitors on your team, once you get down to 8, uh, where are they in the onion? Are
Hmm.
they in the 5 or in the 3? Because if they're in the 3, you run into the same problem again. If they keep winning, they're going to cut out your 5.
Yeah.
And so um, that's where you have to start incorporating some other tactics. And certainly when we look at somebody like Derek in 16, it wasn't only the onion strategy. He
Yeah.
definitely employed other things, but the onion strategy was like a big, focus of what he did, obviously. But yeah,
Yeah.
the competition's definitely the biggest weakness of this strategy.
That's true. And we can get into that a little bit more later too. But let's talk about, like, the start of the parachute strategy. Firstly, if you don't mind, could you define in your terms how you feel about the parachute strategy?
So the parachute strategy, I talked, I referred to it kind of like as like a divide and conquer kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what
Um,
it is.
when I talked about it a few years ago, because that's kind of how it works, right? The
Mhm.
parachute strategy is taking, and I think the best way to describe it is by talking about the brigade or the cookout, where um, in the brigade you had 4 people, and each one of them was essentially assigned
Hmm.
a person. You go and hang out with this person, and obviously the cookout did something very similar, where you have Tiffany grabbing Claire, you had Xavier grabbing Alyssa, Kyland with Sarah Beth, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Um, and the purpose of that is that that person is their parachute. And I believe that terminology was coined by the brigade, because
Yeah.
the idea is that like they're backup. They're like a way for you to maintain influence over the rest of the house without having to actually win something yourself
Hmm.
or anything like that. And if you need to pull your parachute at any point, they can go because they're not part of
Hmm.
the actual alliance. Um, and so, like the benefit of this is that you can artificially inflate your numbers.
Yeah.
It's kind of like um, a pseudo onion in the sense that like instead of having an 8-person official alliance, you can have a 4-person alliance with 4 parachutes,
Hmm.
and you don't actually need a majority if none of the other people know that they're supposed to be in the alliance. Because you can just start picking them off one by one using the other 3 to pick off the one because
Hmm.
they don't realize that they were actually working with them this whole time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I like that definition. I agree, and I feel like when it comes to like where it all started, at least for me, I actually like to. I just can't help but think of the Parachute Alliance in needing the sense of discretion. Like it needs to be
Mhm.
discreet. It has to be secret. So it always makes me think of Danielle and Jason, even
Yep.
though like it's just 2 of them. That was the idea. Like, when you go back to Big Brother 2, Big Brother 3, when Danielle and Jason were playing, they were intentionally um, pretending to not be as close as they were. They were a secret alliance in order for them to divide and conquer, like you said earlier. And that's just the same strategy, except more people. And I feel like when I want to look at the origin of it, like it really goes all the way back there, with the fact of it being secret. Because with the onion strategy, it doesn't have to be secret. Like it's better if it is, but it can work even if it's not, because it's so powerful in the sense that everyone thinks they're in it. Kind of. But with the parachute strategy, I feel like being secretive and it not being known is at the core of the strategy working. So I don't know. I always thought of Danielle and Jason. What do you think of that though?
Yeah, absolutely. That they are definitely the first example of this kind of strategy.
Yeah.
Obviously, a very early version of it. And I think that if you were to get like really technical about like parachute, the idea of a parachute is usually 1 person per member.
Yeah.
Theirs was a little different in the sense that they were 1 person each, and
Yeah.
they attached themselves to slightly larger groups.
Yeah.
So like Danielle would go over here, Jason would go over here and bond with these people. And that way they were able to have some amount of influence over the direction of the game. But not as much as you would if you had 4 or 6 people
Yeah.
who had like 1 person each, because then you have a lot more fine control. But it was definitely that early sort of version of this, and secrecy is of the utmost for
Yeah.
this kind of strategy. Secrecy also very important for the onion strategy, of course, in that you can't have the 3 people uh, figure out that they're the 3 people.
Yeah.
You have to keep it secret that there's a secret 5 and then a secret 3 and a secret 2. Otherwise, the whole thing crumbles. But you can have, it's layers of secrets, as the onion
Yeah.
would indicate, where it's like the 6 people can know about the 8 people, the 5 people can know about the 8 people.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of different like layers of who can know what, whereas the parachute strategy is very much like there's a core
Yeah.
group that we share everything, and then we have to keep this a secret. Otherwise, nothing works.
Hmm.
Because if the parachutes realize that they're parachutes, then everything crumbles.
Exactly. So you talked about like the onion strategy it being eight, then the five, and then the three. Starting off at eight is probably a good number for the onion strategy. You would think probably.
Yeah, and they're just example numbers. It could be anything really,
See,
and
and that's
it doesn't have to be clean either. It could be like there
yeah,
could be a 6-person alliance, and there's 5 people within the six, and
yeah.
then there's whatever.
So what do you think is like the best for each strategy? What do you think is the best number of people or range? Because especially with the parachute alliance, like six was a well, six was a lot. It felt to actually accomplish what they accomplished. So it was like surprising, and that's why it was so amazing. With four, it was a little bit more easy to trust them because with that alliance, you
Mhm.
have to be trusting of each other in some
Yeah,
way.
six is a huge number, especially because there wasn't any real parachute or a real onion structure within it.
Yeah,
It's a lot easier to maintain a larger number if you have uh, little mini versions of onions or parachutes within the alliance to keep everyone feeling like they're at the top of it.
yeah.
Um, but, of course, like, the cookout, I think was able to accomplish something that nobody had been able to before and likely ever will again. So, you know, I would say that if you're, like, going on to Big Brother, trying to get a six-person parachute alliance going, maybe a little ambitious.
Mhm.
Might not wanna go for that number.
What do you think will work? Do you think another parachute alliance can be successful with five, four, or do you think they just don't? You think
I
five and four is just a little bit more easy?
I think so. At the end of the day, I think that the most important thing is find the right number that works for you. Um,
Mhm.
you know, whatever that might be. Maybe there are 6 people that can get together that all have a common cause,
Yeah,
or you just all really vibe really
yeah,
well and it just works. And you just want to go for six for that reason. The problem again is that, like, even with that, you still want to be careful because
mhm,
when secrecy is so important, and with the parachute alliance it's so important, um every single uh additional person you add on is another massive liability.
yeah,
Especially because with the parachute alliance there's so much trust that has to be placed in each member,
mhm,
because each member has a lot more power than in the Onion Alliance. Um, every single person has their own parachute that they could jump ship with their parachute,
mhm,
and say, you know what, screw you guys, I'm going over here. They all have their own corners of the house that they could run to,
yeah,
and rat you out and flip the entire thing. So again, every additional person you add on is another risk to the entire structure.
exactly. Okay, let's get into more of the let's get into the pros. Kind of the most positive aspects I feel of the two alliances. And specifically with the onion, I want to ask like why do you think it is? Because what we saw Cody do in Big Brother 22 was against some of the more capable players and they've played multiple times. They are all actually good players. And that's the thing. People kind of try to say that in Big Brother 22 the players were not playing well and I don't agree fully. I feel like a lot of them were playing really well, but they still fell victim to the onion strategy. And that's what kind of amazes me is like why do you think that is? I don't think Danny's stupid or Nicole isn't that smart. Like I think they're super intelligent, super great players. So why do you think it is they still fell to the structure of the onion, you know? It's funny to say it like that, but yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, I think it's interesting. I think that Cody was very smart with how he approached this season. I think that he kept it very simple, which you had to for this kind of season. A parachute alliance or strategy I don't think could have worked
Hmm.
on an all-star season like this. It relies too much on like high level deception and obfuscation. Because with the parachute structure, again, one of the disadvantages of that is that it's harder to come up with the facade,
Yeah.
um, right? Again, like with the onion, you can have an 8-person thing, and then there's a 5-person thing, but you can be like, yeah, but we're actually the 5 over here,
Yeah.
or this is actually the 5 over here. And or you don't even have to say that at all sometimes. Sometimes you just be like, oh, we'll just battle it out once we get to 8. And people will just buy that a lot of the time. With parachute structure, it's like, well, there's a duo here, a duo here, a duo here, a duo here,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, what are we doing? We're just 2 people. We need to figure something out.
Yeah.
Where's the structure of the house? And you can't be like, I don't know. We're just chilling.
Yeah.
Or it's harder to, at least. The brigade did it, and the cookout did it, but it's harder, especially if you have experienced players who are not going to buy that. Like, we're all just at summer camp and nobody's
Yeah.
got a big alliance. So Cody kept it simple. He created a couple of like overlapping
Yeah.
onion structured alliances, uh, and then tried to just grab as many of the comp winners as he could. Took out as many of the outside comp winners as early as possible,
Hmm.
and then just rode the comps down to the end. Right.
Yeah.
Um, Now there was more to it, of course, within the onion structure that he had put together. He had to sort of, you know, finagle his way through. He had to grab Nicole away from Danny.
Yeah.
Um, he had to win Danny over enough to be able to convince her to do his bidding on her HOH, to improve his own, position moving forward. He had to deal with Tyler before Tyler self imploded. Um, and so there was a lot of stuff that he had to navigate, but as the person at the center of everything, the person that had really put all of this together, he had the most amount of power and influence to make these things happen,
Hmm.
and was able to just like little by little get these small little wins in
Yeah.
week by week until the small wins turned into bigger wins and it just avalanched from there.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason why they let him do this is because um, at first it seemed small. It seemed like, okay, well, look, Cody has put this thing together, and it keeps all of us safe for a long time in an
Hmm.
all-star season. Like, this is simple, it's easy. Let's just ride this for a while, and then hey, we'll do something later. Plus, I trust Cody. I think he's actually with me.
Hmm.
Um, and then as that ball started rolling, the momentum started to get too much to overturn, even once they figured out that they were in trouble.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think we can just talk about the cons of it too, because I feel like what you just said is the issue, because you can think of pros and cons in the terms of the person who's kind of leading it, like the Derek or the Cody, but you can
Mhm.
also think of it in the terms of the other people. And like I feel like a big con for someone who's in a structure like that is like, are you at the center? How you think you are? Because I feel like Danny kind of thought she was, and Nicole kind of thought she was Cody's number two, and everyone thought that. And I feel like that's the biggest risk of it, is that no matter how many times you played the game, or no matter how much experience you have with the game, is you could still, you don't really know how do you know that you are the one. You know what I'm saying? Or how do you know that you're the one who created this? And I think that's the biggest con of it all, and why I can see how it might be like a little bit more comfortable to be in a parachute structure where you kind of know we all have an equal amount of opportunity to dip,
Mhm.
because in the onion it's like, what if it's not me? And I feel like how can someone decipher that? How do you feel like someone could overcome that issue, because Danny and Nicole didn't do it? um I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of how I look at it too. I like the onion is structured so that like everything falls into place for one person,
Yeah, that one
basically.
person.
It's like it's like the opposite of the trickle down economic theory. It's like everything trickles down to one person,
Hmm.
and everything is designed to help one person win the game.
Hmm.
Um, the parachute strategy is designed for one alliance
Yeah,
to
one group.
succeed, and people within the alliance have a much more equal chance of winning. So um, the problem is that you can't really decide what alliance you're in
Yeah,
unless
that's
you
true.
are the creator. And if you're the creator, you're almost always going to want to do onion if that's possible for you
Yeah.
because that's better for you. Um, so if you find yourself in an onion layered structured alliance,
Yeah.
it can be really tricky. It's like how far down the mountain are you? If is the
Yeah.
avalanche already
Yeah.
hitting? Because you could say, oh well, get some other options, explore
Hmm.
the people outside the alliance, try to get something together. The problem is that if you do that in the middle of an onion structured alliance, there's a good chance that the person at the center will have the power to just be like, "Oh, you're causing trouble?
Hmm.
Bye." Um, and there's also a good chance that you don't necessarily know who's at the center or what kind
Yeah.
of power and influence that they have, and you might step on a landmine. Um, so it gets very tricky.
It does.
I think that you know, with a parachute, most of the information. You know where people's allies are. You know who they have, and what what exists.
Hmm.
Um, with the onion structure, you don't know those things for sure.
Yeah.
You can think you know where things are, but the most important thing for you to do in an onion structure is gather information. Try to determine who is with who's
Hmm.
loyal to who. Because here's the thing, there's usually one person at the center of it, and they're usually very good at lying and manipulating.
Yeah.
But not everyone is all the time.
Yeah.
For as good as Derek is at tricking people into thinking that he's with them or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
Um, if you talked to Beast Mode Cowboy, you might be able to get some things out of him that
Yeah.
Derek wouldn't have let slip. And if you get from Beast Mode Cowboy that he is actually, Derek's a really stand-up guy. I really
Yeah.
like Derek a lot. Target Derek? No, definitely. Why would we do that? That's not something that we should ever do. You might be able to pick up that, like, hold on. Beast Mode Cowboy is super loyal to Derek, then
Hmm.
what does Derek have going on? And gathering that information is super valuable because you know who to approach, who not to approach, whether you want to try to uh, go to Derek and be like, hey, look, I'm the guy you want to bring to the end.
Hmm.
Or if you want to try to take him down by, going to, hey, maybe in season 16, it would be going to Donnie and being like, I believe you.
Hmm.
um, but again, it depends on like where you are, because the thing about the onion strategy is that it's very, very dominant.
Yeah.
If once you get to a certain point, it's very difficult to overcome.
So do you think so? So do you feel like it's harder to be a member of an Onion Alliance and succeed or overcome than it is with the other option, basically?
Yes, I think so. I think that as an individual who's not at the core,
Yeah.
you would much prefer to be in an onion, or sorry, in a parachute
Yeah.
structured alliance, because you have more options, you have more information, and more ability to win and pivot,
Yeah.
um, than in an onion structured alliance. If you are at the core, if you're the person,
Hmm.
then you'd rather have an onion,
Yeah.
because that's much better for you.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. And we can talk more about the parachute because you mentioned a lot of the pros. You mentioned a lot of the pros of the parachute, especially in the one that I want to kind of get into is the one that I don't know if it's a pro because they don't have to win the comps. They don't have to rely on competitions. And I put it in the pros category, but well, I guess it is a pro because you don't have to, but in a way it's like, does that mean they have to rely more on strategy or Is it just that they are relying more on strategy? Am I making any sense right now?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that you have a smaller alliance, so you don't have to deal with the onion stuff as much. And you don't have to have your alliance win as much because you can have your parachutes win for you.
Yeah.
And even if your parachutes don't win, you can throw your parachutes out in front of you as targets. And usually you have enough influence over the votes to make sure that the parachute leaves instead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it works on a bunch of different fronts. And obviously anybody that watched Big Brother 23 knows like exactly how it works because Tiffany like just laid out all the rules
Yeah.
for it for everyone. But yeah, if you get put up on the block, if Tiffany gets put up on the block next to Claire, Claire leaves because not only does the rest of the cookout vote out Claire, but
Mm-hmm.
they are able to influence their people to vote out Claire as well. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And if Claire is to win an HOH, then Tiffany is in Claire's ear to make sure that at the very least, she nominates one person outside of the cookout to make sure that they would then be able to influence the votes to make sure that person's the one to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially valuable if like Claire is winning a bunch of the HOHs, then it's even easier for the rest of the alliance to influence other people to go after Claire because she's the more threatening person within that pair. And she's also the one making enemies of the rest of the house by nominating people, going after people, and
Mm-hmm.
so fostering those disagreements and those like rivalries between your parachutes or the people outside of the alliance, it becomes very simple.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it relies more on strategy for sure, but it's almost like it gives you uh, a tool set to make those strategies a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's like a template. It's like if you're it's like if regular Big Brother is having to color in the lines, you know, like in the coloring book,
Yeah.
then the parachute strategy is like a template you can put over that, like you can just color all over and it's still, you know, you take the template
It'll
off and
still
it's
cover
perfect.
in the lines.
So um that's it's like it's like baby's first Big Brother strategy. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot simpler. It's a way easier. But the problem is you got to set it up properly.
Yeah. Do you feel like the thing I noticed with the parachute, which is also like pro and a con again, is like the lack of a hierarchy, I guess, within the alliance, which we talked about. But it's like when we really get into it, it's like it's positive because in a way, because you can kind of just get to the end together and then you can work your way from there. But it's negative because of the same thing. We saw Matt and Tiffany get the creators of both of those structures were the first two out, were the first out each time. So it's like, what does that say about it? In a way, it's like, I guess, what do you do in that situation? Or I
I
don't
think
know.
I think what it says
I
is
don't know.
should have created an onion instead.
You should have created an onion. Yeah,
Because the
that's what it
creator of the
is.
onion is the one that wins.
But
The creator of the parachute is the one that gets kicked out first usually.
it's crazy because at least going into this, I always felt like the parachute was just clearly extremely dominant. But it's like dominant in the sense of the alliance as a whole, you know, not as a the person. And I think that's what needs to be separated is that as a personal player, like to play for yourself, the more dominant strategy is going to be the onion if you can succeed in it, and I guess getting it done. I guess.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel? Do you have any more thoughts on like either of the strategy when it comes to positives, negatives, anything like that that
Um
jump out at you?
I think that another important aspect of the parachute alliance, first of all, I would say I think the next step here obviously is combining the two in
Yeah,
some way or another. Um, but but if you haven't done that, which you know, the parachute has very pure examples in the brigade and the cookout because they really didn't do much onioning there. The brigade did a little bit, The cookout tried to, but it just all kind of like, it was very messy.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any clear onion structure. So then you can look at, of course, if we want to dip into Canada a little bit, we also had the Pretty Boys,
Yeah.
who attempted to mimic the Brigade. Um, and this is again what I mean, like they literally just took the template and were like, "Can we do that?" Um, and the Pretty Boys, I think, is a great example of this. They had a little bit of onion with Dane and Anthony, but
Yeah.
it's very important for the parachute structure to have a bonding agent, something to keep the alliance together. Because again, you have to rely a lot on trust.
Yeah.
Um, we talk about the parachute alliances that succeeded, but we don't talk as much about the ones that just completely failed. For example, Brian Hart in season 10 tried to set up a parachute-esque alliance, and immediately it failed because they couldn't trust Ollie.
Yeah.
In season 15, the moving company
Yeah.
tried to set something up. It immediately failed because McRae, they couldn't trust. And you know, the list goes on. People have attempted this and it doesn't work. It only works if you can find the right people that you can trust, and if you can keep those people together. For the Brigade, it was nobody has ever done this before, and we are all loyal to each other. And you had Enzo, who was really like the bonding agent. He really helped keep the group together, rah rah, and it worked. For the Pretty Boys, obviously it was Anthony. I mean, the guy was a master at keeping people together.
Yeah.
And then with the cookout, I mean, fascinating example of an alliance. It wasn't really necessarily one person that was keeping them together. It was the cause that they
The
had
cause.
to
Yeah.
get all 6 of them to the end. And man, they didn't want to at times. but but they put their differences aside in order to accomplish that goal. And so there's always something keeping the people together when it works.
Yeah.
And so that's very important. Now, what I think is a good way to keep people together is, again, combining these elements.
Yeah.
If you can make a parachute structured alliance and have an onion structure within that, you know, let's take the cookout. If you,
Yeah.
and because again, this is what Tiffany tried.
I was just gonna say, like, why do you think, because Tiffany's a clearly capable player, why do you think it was so difficult in that situation for her to kind of get that to work? It was like she was struggling, or it was like really not working.
I think for Tiffany, the problem was that because again, like, in order to make an onion work, you have to be, you know, kind of the creator of it to a degree. You have to be able to pick your people.
Yeah.
You have to be able to pick your people well, because you need the right people to be with you in certain layers and not with you in other layers. And Tiffany, she didn't really have the ability. I mean, she ultimately she picked her people, right?
Yeah.
She picked her cause. But I think that if she were to have like designed an onion structure for herself, there would have been some substitutions
Yeah.
for like her own
Yeah.
personal strategic advancement.
And
And
it wouldn't have been a parachute anyways. It would have just been an onion, most likely.
well, I think that, like, let's say she comes up with the idea to make a parachute alliance.
Hmm.
She could have just had, you know, she could have structured it differently, right?
Yeah.
Like, she could have had different people involved and then had them
Yeah.
be parachuting other people, and it could have worked differently. And also, like, an important part of the onion strategy is that it doesn't always fall like perfectly in place, right? It's not
Yeah.
always 8 to 5 to 3 or whatever. Sometimes you have to take out some people early.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, if Tiffany had been able to, you know, cut out maybe Xavier a little sooner, maybe even, you know, like Derek F
Yeah.
in order to, because he's never gonna work with her.
Yeah.
So going to 6 with him is just very dangerous. Like that's where I think things in a different circumstance might have played
Mhm.
out better for her given what she attempted.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's just too complex to even attempt to combine both in a way? Because I was like thinking, like, if you're a newbie, you're playing the next season, of course you're gonna just try to make an onion naturally. And then to even go further from there, is it even necessary? It's kind of what I'm thinking or feeling.
I No, I agree. I think that you can hear about these kinds of structures, and you will occasionally get somebody that sort of knows about them. They'll go on the show and they'll be like, I want this. I would
Mhm,
like 1 order of onion and 1 order of parachute, please.
mhm,
And that's not really how it works, right?
yeah,
You have to work with what you're given,
yeah,
and not every season will give you the ingredients necessary to create an onion alliance or a parachute alliance or any combination of the two.
mhm,
Um, and also, you might not be the kind of player that can create either of those.
yeah,
It takes a certain kind of player with certain kinds of opportunities to create these kinds of alliances. And if you aren't that kind of player or you don't have those kind of opportunities, then it's probably not going to work out for you. And you have to operate in a different way. You have to maybe hope that you are included in one. And there are
mhm,
different strategies to like optimize your chances of being invited into one of these alliances.
mhm,
You can maybe influence how it's created and what the structure is from that point, but that changes what you might want it to be, right?
yeah,
Like maybe
exactly.
you're much more likely to want it to be a parachute alliance, but do you have a parachute ready to go that's not in the alliance? Because if you don't, then that's not super useful to you anymore. So it's so dependent on your circumstances, and that's why when we talk about like best players, best winners, or whatever, I tend to value adaptability so highly,
Mhm,
and seeing winners that have faced all kinds of different situations and scenarios and been able to like maneuver their way through them. I think is super valuable skill because Big Brother is absolutely not a one size fits all kind of game. Even
yeah,
though you do see these kinds of strategies as the most dominant ones, and if you can make them work, they tend to feel kind of cookie cutter. Uh, it's That's only for certain people at certain times.
mhm. I was gonna ask, like, do you feel like in the future, I guess, or even now, are these just going to be the variations of strategy we get, and anything else would just be an expansion or even less than? Or do you feel like something totally new can come up? Or do you just feel like it's been so many seasons and this is probably everything's probably just gonna expand off of these, most likely, right?
It's a great question. I think that I would love to see a totally new concept be introduced by some, innovative visionary.
Right.
I don't think I'm that person. I think that like for me, these feel like the basic tools that
Yeah.
any game like this, whether it's Big Brother or Survivor or whatever, will always use secrecy, um, onion structure, divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Those are like the 3 basic tool sets I think that go into any social strategy game. Um, and finding the right combination of those things for you is going to be what leads the most amount of players to the most amount of success, I think.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. I mean, do you have anything else you want to say about it though? About the topic?
I do find
'Cause
it
it's really
super
fun.
interesting. I
Yeah,
think that
it is
like
a really interesting topic. That's what I like.
yeah,
So you feel like, well, to conclude, do you feel like one is clearly just better? You feel like the onion is clearly the more effective strategy?
Well, again, it depends, like, for who or
For you, well,
right?
not you, but like for a, because I feel like you're a player, you're trying to win on your own.
Yes.
It's obviously just got to be the onion, but it could be that it could. We're about to loop all the way back around.
It's
But
again, I think
it
it
depends.
depends, right? Like
Yeah,
and that's why like you know when you asked me about this topic, I was like, I don't know if it's going to be a good debate, but it might be a
yeah,
good discussion
yeah,
because I don't think there's a good hard stance on this.
yeah.
And that's something that like is part of what makes Big Brother so interesting is that even when you are just trying to look at the strategy, you still have to look at the individual people involved in the strategy. You can say, well, this strategy is objectively better than this strategy, but that's only true for some people.
Mhm.
Um, and you have to account for the fact that not everyone has the same skill set or opportunity or you know ability to take part or create these kinds of strategies. So uh, you know we
Yeah.
could say like I would say for me, let's say I go on to Big Brother.
Hmm.
Um,
Which you would or you would never do.
I mean probably would never do.
Okay.
Uh, but I would probably and again because ultimately like I think the trying to go for a pure onion or pure parachute or whatever is kind of a fool's errand in my
Yeah.
opinion. You should absolutely be trying to combine the two in some way. That Derek absolutely combined the two in some way. Cody did as well. You know, even if you look at Xavier's success with the cookout, you know, it wasn't like super pre-planned, and it kind of came together last minute, but he absolutely won because his onion was more effective than Tiffany's.
Yeah.
Um, and Hayden had a better. It was a very small onion, but it was a better onion than
Hmm.
Matt or Lane or Enzo. And same with Dane. Dane was at the center of the onion within the Pretty Boys.
Yeah.
There's always some amount of combination of the two, even if there's like a sort of like more central structure to the whole thing. Um, I think that I like I would function better in an onion structure
Hmm.
myself if I'm looking at like if I'm trying to anticipate what I would do.
Yeah.
Because I'm somebody that I think would operate well in a group that has like, okay, these are the people I'm closest to.
Hmm.
When I've played like little online versions of these games, this is sort of how it's worked as well, where it's like, you know, it just kind of functions with me, I think, in that way.
Hmm.
That's best, but that's not true. I think for everyone necessarily. Some people are going to function better in onion in a parachute situation better. Some people are you know, some people are better off as floaters,
Yeah.
which is, you know, another, obviously, another like big strategy that doesn't really involve these things as much.
Hmm.
Of like, you know, going around being more of an individual player.
Yeah.
Um, so it's super dependent on who you are and what your strengths are, I think, and what you're trying to do. I think if we wanted to try and look at like what method will achieve the most consistent success, you
Hmm.
still have to look at like for for what? For an individual
Yeah.
winner? Then I would say that um I think that the parachute strategy is more likely to produce a winner from the core alliance
Hmm.
than the onion strategy.
Okay.
Um, if that's your objective.
Yeah.
Um, the while the onion strategy is more likely to produce a specific winner
Hmm.
from the entire group of players.
Yeah.
Um, and That's that's kind of the distinction there.
That's that on that. That's fair. That's a good enough. I think that's a good enough conclusion. I think I agree. I think if it were me, the only worry with the onion would be, am I the center of the onion? Um, and of course, you just have to naturally strategize around that, but you just don't have to worry about that with the parachute. So I guess if you're not or if you're an anxious person, maybe just do a parachute, because then at least you know we're all just
Well,
trying to get to
but
the end.
if you're an anxious person, I think with the parachute, you're going
You
to be
ain't gonna make
constantly
it.
anxious about all of the people because you don't get to hang out with your alliance as much, and
Yeah.
you see them hanging out with other people, and they could turn on you at any moment.
That's true. I just thought of a player, but no names will be said. But I did want to ask you, because I guess it's kind of related, because the cookout was that structure, and then we saw in 24, in Big Brother 24, girl, they were worried. Like, they were worried. First of all, I don't think Paloma Spec was trying to recreate it, but they were worried about the creation of another cookout, but mostly
Mm.
because of the race of it all. And then we see 25 is coming up. Do you feel like it's going to be any more remnants of that worry in 25, or do you feel like Big Brother 25 is going to be a little bit more of a clean slate? Because even in Canada, same thing kind of happened with Big Brother Canada 10, and then in this season it was like they or Big Brother Canada 10, Kyle was worried about the same thing because of the cookout, and then in 11 they were able to kind of just play freely in a way. Do you feel
Mhm.
like in US it's going to be similar, or do you feel like it's still going to be some sprinkles of
I would
worry?
imagine that Kyle broke that,
You're right.
right? Like, I would
That's what you
imagine
would
that
hope.
anybody that watched 24 now knows, like, don't be
Give it
doing
up.
that.
Yeah.
That is not okay, not good to do, and also not even good strategy,
Yeah.
not even close.
He was doing so
Um,
good, and then was
yeah.
just weird. I don't. Okay, we're not gonna get into it, but yeah.
Talk about getting in your own way. Um, but yeah, I think that I would imagine, I would hope that we're past that, that's over. Um, like, in terms of being worried about a potential, like, parachute structured alliance, those are very tricky to catch on to. Like, if you don't
Right.
catch it immediately, you're probably not going to catch it.
Yeah.
It's very tough to catch. Um, whereas the onion strategy needs to be constantly maintained. It's easier to set up and to, like, uh, create, like, a fake story about it,
Mhm.
um, but harder to maintain.
Right.
Um, and so I think it's easier to catch that than the parachute alliance. If you're worried about a parachute alliance, then, like, how do you catch it? I would say, what is the narrative of the house,
If
right?
like, if are you saying, like, if you wanted to catch a parachute alliance, you're trying to figure out
Mhm.
how you could catch one?
Yeah.
I don't feel like you can. That's why. That's how I feel. Or
I think
like.
it's hard. I think you have to take a look at, I mean, this is true of anything. If you're a couple of weeks in, certainly if you're more than a couple of weeks in, and you take a look at the house
Mhm.
and the structure of alliances and where people are, and it just seems like a big mess to you. Uh, there's a bunch of groups, there's people over here, there's duos over here.
Yeah.
There's no real structure to this game. Uh, you're wrong.
Right.
There's always a structure to the game.
Mhm.
And if you don't see it, that means that you are at the bottom of it. So if you can't find the narrative of what the house is doing, where things are, you need to start figuring that out. Not loudly, because somebody asking questions often, again, gets dealt with very quickly.
Mhm.
But you need to be taking a good hard look, and most importantly, if you ever win power and you haven't changed that, if you win HOH and by the end of the week you still don't know what's the main structure of the house is, where the narrative is, you have
Mhm.
done something extremely wrong.
Yeah.
uh if you win power and you know that you don't have a good view of what's happening, that needs to change during that week, or you're done.
Yeah. So it's like, as a viewer, the reason I was like, it seems impossible, because as a viewer, it's like, the looking at onion structures, it's like that's so easy. Like, why don't they know? It's kind of how it feels watching. But as the watching the parachute, it's like, girl, I would never know that. Like I would never be able to figure that out. So that's why I'm just like, ooh, like I just don't see how even the most, because Big Brother 23 had the smartest cast in damn near the entire history of the show, in my opinion. And it's like they were not able to. Well, and that's the thing. Even they were like, but they weren't even able to figure that out. And it's like that's hard. But 23 is very specific, so I don't think that'll ever
It's tricky. So and you actually this makes me think of another good distinction between the two. The parachute strategy, in order to figure it out, would rely on ignoring your personal feelings and thinking more strategically about, like, okay, because that's what makes it so hard to figure out, is that, like, Claire is like, Tiffany loves me. I love Tiffany. We're best friends in this house. So obviously we're working together. Obviously she's more loyal to me than anybody else. And Tiffany feels that way. She likes Claire probably more than most people, at least, in the house. And if she had her way, would never have evicted Claire. But there was a more strategic like layer above that you would never be able to see if you stopped at that first layer. Whereas the Onion Alliance tends to be based more on personal relationships, like, and ignoring the personal relationships is what gets you in trouble. Cody and Derek are super tight. But it's fine because I'm in the alliance with Derek and I'm with Derek. Like, no, they're super tight for a reason. And that's how Derek succeeded. That's how Cody succeeded. Like, well, Cody will choose me over Enzo, even though they've been best friends all season long. No, you have to look at those things. So it's almost like two sides of the same coin, where it's like the parachute stuff is ignoring personal relationships, having an overarching strategy, and the Onion stuff tends to be more relationship focused, ignoring the fake strategy structure in front of you and focusing on personal relationships.
It's the comparison you made, or the example you gave with Tiffany and Claire. It's funny because while watching, and I also saw a lot of the fans feel like this is just this time is that this will ever happen. But when I'm thinking about it, that applies to multiple parachutes, because even Adam might have chosen, what's that girl named
Sam?
He might, it applied in every single parachute scenario, because Lane and Brittany, Adam and Sam, it's like, it's always still a more strategy based thing, even though it seemed like it was really just the cookout who would ever do this. But that's not even true, because Adam was probably not going to get that Sam girl out. And same with Lane. Like, there's speculation that he might have not evicted Brittany. And I feel like it's interesting that you brought that up, because I didn't even, a lot of people, including myself, just feel like the cookout is so niche. But even what they did happened to the other parachute alliance.
I mean, the biggest difference is that Tiffany had to do it herself. Right, and
that makes it seem
really
way more dramatic.
The other players, like, we never really will know if they would have chosen the team over that person, but we never had to, because it was taken out of their hands. Whereas Tiffany had to take the knife and slide it right in.
Yeah, damn, that's so sucky to think about. But but she did it. Shoot, but yes. Taran, I think we like looped around again, but I think that's enough for today, at least.
Awesome.
Where can people find you?
The best place to find me is on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong. If you want to hang out, watch some games or shows, or just ask me some questions, you can find me over there.
Yes, sir. His Twitch is nice. Go check it out, y'all. I've seen it. Also, follow us at T Reality Kingdom everywhere. Make sure you guys subscribe or whatever. And we're out. Yeah.